In video games, you sometimes have alcohol that you can consume in the game, and it practically never has any positive effects. It blurs your vision, makes you unstable, so if it's a shooter like BioShock, you're just not as good at shooting. The game becomes harder and less fun. And that's exactly the same with life. This right here is called a monkey. It's a small 100 milliliter vodka bottle, and every single day before noon in Poland, 1 million of these are sold. Talk about peer pressure of the place you live in. Yeah. And I'm gonna tell you how I quit drinking and how it had a profound effect on my life, both in terms of mental health, physical health, and even financials, because they totally exploded when I stopped. It's completely normal for people here to have a beer or two every night of the week and then get completely wasted on the weekends. Many people that I know are saying that they need that beer or two every day after work to distress, to have this kind of time to themselves, that relaxation. And since it's just a beer or two, it's not alcoholism, right? There is also a saying that if you don't drink, you're not a trustworthy person. And most people think you're weird. And in my house, my parents were both non-drinkers. There was never really alcohol in the house, and I don't remember seeing any of them drunk. So obviously, when I was in my late teens, I had to rebel against that. And most of my friends from the neighborhood were already drinking. They were a year or two older than me, and we had this thing for years to meet up at this little almost park kind of in the middle of the road between our houses, and just meet there every evening and have a beer or two and just talk. And we were thinking that we're cementing the friendship and having meaningful conversations and bitching about our day and, you know, talking about the first love and the first job problems and whatever. And it felt good. It felt like a natural thing, but that beer or two was always there. And I need to tell you something that I'm not really proud of, but it is important to illustrate the problem. It was so natural for us to drink that at some point we devised a game to throw an empty beer bottle into the nearby bushes, and if it hit another bottle with a loud clink, you get points. And obviously all of the bottles there were ours. So after a while, the game became nonsensical because there was always a bottle that's gonna be hit, no matter how you throw it. I went there a couple years later and cleaned it all up. And now try to remember, it's all framed in a way that we didn't really get drunk. We weren't losing jobs or behaving erratically, and our speech wasn't slurred. It was just a couple beers, but it went on and on and on. And I can imagine that meeting out there just to talk without the beers wouldn't have been possible. That was most of my 20s, but I also was in an electropunk band for most of my 20s, later 20s, and that was a drinking issue as well. We were playing pretty rough electropunk. We weren't really good, but we were good enough to have some fans and to travel all across the country and into some European countries as well. We weren't paid a lot for the gigs, but there was an open bar in every single venue, which means that both before the show and after the show, we were drinking practically as much as we could. Mostly beers in my case. Yeah, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 beers a night, 9 beers sometimes, and if the show went well, we were just drinking ourselves silly. And I kind of noticed that the whole playing shows and doing all those things was actually mostly just to have that free alcohol, and that didn't really sound that good when you put it that way. And at around 32, I started to notice that I'm getting fat. slower, less cognitively able to come up with stuff, and kind of decaying, feeling old and bad. Right at that time, I switched from just any beer to drinking craft beer. And I was lying to myself, saying that by drinking craft beer, I'm doing better for myself and I'm not drinking that corporate garbage that everyone is drinking. No, I'm drinking craft beer, which is practically good for you. It's almost like medicine, right? But it always had between 5 and 7% of alcohol. And back at that time, quitting drinking wasn't really an option. It was out of the question. I couldn't even wrap my head around the idea of quitting drinking completely. But I started to slowly limit my intake. I participated in something called a dry January, which basically means that for the month of January, you're not drinking any alcohol. And then guess what happened on February 1st of almost every year where I did that dry January? Because I felt great in January. But then on the very first day of February, I was already out drinking, lying to myself saying, yeah, I need those couple craft beers because they are quality. This is good, it has good hops and good barley and whatever, and it's made in this awesome way, probably with some vitamins and everything. So yeah, I just need to have it. And to counter that, I started to run a bit. I lost some weight. I was 100K, which is for my height pretty fat. And I went down to 88 at that time. So 12 down, not bad. Running helped, slightly better diet, but I couldn't really get myself to stop drinking. And then at 37, which was in 2019, I met a guy who was already 5 years after he quit drinking completely, and he said he doesn't miss it at all, and life generally is better. And what he also said, what actually caught my attention, is that he noticed that a little brain fog that you have when you're drinking constantly. It's not like you're drunk or you're unable to do stuff, but it just lowers your baseline cognitive ability. So if you're building a business or you're doing something, whatever it is, you're 5 to 10% worse at it, even on the days that you're not drinking, even after a week of the last beer. And I started to notice that actually it completely makes sense. So I decided to quit completely. And it's been exactly 6 years now. I quit drinking, and I can honestly say that it was the best decision that I ever made because of that 5 to 10% decline in your abilities, because that really works. It's amazing that we don't really think about it. We consider that only when we're drunk that we're kind of less able to do stuff. But the motivation and the overall perception of everything changes, and it takes about a month for you of not drinking for this to work. I practically almost 10x'd my income in those 6 years, and everything that I started was working way, way better. And it's not a huge change, but it compounds and it adds up into what I believe transformed my life completely. 'Cause I'm in a much, much better spot right now. And I really feel like, especially in Poland, especially in countries where heavy drinking is the norm and everybody does it as quickly as possible, and it's considered uncool to not drink, many people are missing out on life, on winning basically, because you might be winning while drinking, but you're winning a little bit less every day. And when that compounds, it might be just that you're 10 times lower than you could have been. To me, this is the 6th year anniversary of not drinking. And I feel like if you're on the line, whether you should quit or not, just do it. Life is way, way, way better. And if you're committed to achieving some goals and trying to, build something in life, it's just a lot easier if you don't have a mind-altering drug that is constantly pushing you a little bit down. I'd rather stay up.